And we're
Hi,
live,
Carolyn.
Dragon.
All right, so we can get started our weekly Hangout live session. Welcome everybody who is watching this session, and we are looking forward to spending next 30 minutes or so discussing issues and topics related to the DLA MOOC. So this is the third week. We are talking about social network analysis. We already learned many things related to learning analytics. We also found our ways through the DLA MOOC and the technologies that are used there. We are getting into some calmer, I would say, waters and hoping that the experience from this point on is smoother, much smoother for everybody. In any case, I mean, we learned several lessons in the last couple of weeks, and I guess we can get started first today about some of those lessons, some of the advice perhaps that the course instructors may have, and then we can move on to some issues related to the theme of this and the following week. So, George, perhaps you want to summarize some of the experience that we had in weeks 1 and 2.
Sure. Well, I think in week 1 and 2, we're really in two things happening. On one hand, there was some orientation time that individuals were going through and just getting comfortable with the course, and in many ways, it looked a lot like a MOOC or any MOOC that I've run in the past, and MOOCs that I've taken as well. It had a lot of similar elements, which is the process of learners trying to get comfortable with the content, trying to get comfortable with how things are being done. Every course or every MOOC has some unique different elements to it, so there was that aspect where students are trying to figure out what's relevant or what's consequential and so on. So I think that was not at all unusual compared to a traditional or any other MOOCs I've taken. One area that was from some of the comments that we received, certainly in discussion forums and otherwise, that was a little interesting was for students to get comfortable with the structure of the course. And so comments ranged, and I just posted an email I sent out today, is there were some learners that commented they didn't realize that there had been content posted, and so I just posted a short video that looked at where content can be found in the course under the courseware tab. And so looking at the course orientation, the week 1 intro to learning analytics, and then week 2 where we started looking at a range of things from a quick introduction to what some of the data cycles might look like, looking at data sources, kinds of questions that you would ask, visualization and dashboards, and then we also briefly introduced some systems level considerations. So the first couple of weeks we managed to tick off, if you will, about 5 competencies related to the course, and hopefully for learners that stayed with the content and interacted on social media, ProSolo, or used Bazaar or any of the other tools, there was a sense in which they had a exposure to a range of thinking around, as well as our guest speakers, of course, but around what learning analytics are, what this idea of data wrangling is, what it means to be involved in using a commercial software. We're going to spend most of the course now looking at open source or open software, but I think generally speaking, it was the first several weeks were fairly hectic, and the comments and discussion forums seem to have settled down a little bit, and some of the questions are certainly, I've seen blog posts and otherwise, are focused on working through the course content. So I think it seems to be going well.
Thanks, George. Those are very useful insights. Ryan, you've been also quite active in the discussion forums, and you got engaged in several of those conversations in which students were defining learning analytics and other types of tools, and also some students experiencing some issues with the installation of the technology. What's kind of your take on what we've learned so far and all that experience?
I think that there's a lot of interesting discussions going on. People are, like you said, really grappling with the various tools and with what it's like to be in a MOOC that's a very non-traditional MOOC. And it's been very interesting for me as well to see this and to compare it to my experience teaching very much a traditional XMOOC. So this has been a really interesting experience for me, and it's great to be part of it. I'm looking forward to this week and next week, and then to, as it transitions into other materials too. Should be really fun.
Okay, good. Thanks, Ryan. Caroline, you brought to this course so many nice technologies, and obviously students are experiencing some good benefits. Obviously, there are some issues as with any new technology, but I would say not just new, but any technology which is used for learning and teaching. On the other hand, it's very clear that you are spreading your great passion for the topic on these discussion forums. Could you share a bit of your insight and experience?
Sure. One thing I'd like to point out is that early in the course for the Quick Helper, we were matching help requests to TAs who volunteered to help out in the beginning while we were collecting enough data about the behavior of students in the discussion forum that we could start to defer to them to answer some questions. And now we have linked in a new model, a matching model that we have built based on the data that we've collected from the first few weeks of the course. So now some students who've been active in the discussion forums should start to be receiving some help requests. So I hope that students will take the opportunity to respond to those help requests and thereby engage in some community building. At the same time, I'd like to say my group is fascinated by what we're observing as we're watching students interacting in this course in the chats, in the discussion forum, and over Twitter. And actually one of the fascinating aspects is to see the different kinds of issues and perspectives that come up in these different contexts. But we're also thinking about the kinds of struggles that we have noticed students having, things that seemed confusing, things that were hard for them to find. And we're thinking about new ideas for future courses that might feel more secure to students, that might help to offer them flexibility, but at the same time allowing them to make choices that feel more safe. And so I just wanted to assure the students out there that we really appreciate the time that they are taking to share their experiences with us, because at the same time as we care about the content that we're teaching in this course, we're also just taking the opportunity to try to understand how we can offer better learning opportunities to students, and the experiences that you're willing to share will hopefully make a better world for future students.
Yeah, great, Caroline. That's really useful, and it's very obvious. I mean, from some of these reactions that happened from the beginning of the course, and some of these even small analytics that you provided to the students when they are going, for example, to Bazaar, where they can identify the patterns of the peak hours, or where they can most likely find some other peers. Identifying another peer willing to discuss and chat and reflect on the content of the course is not something that the course instructors can control. At the same time, we are working in a very distributed environment where we have 24/7 availability of potential students, and therefore finding basically a couple of students who can connect at the same time can be quite challenging, and we obviously are learning a lot from that experience. At the same time, we obviously can see that there are some reactions happening. With this weekend, Caroline, I think you already touched on this. We are transitioning and looking at the importance of general social learning and developing of that social capital, if you wish, and the importance of developing connections with other students, other peers. And in this and the next week, especially, we are going to focus on social network analysis and this particular focus on education. In terms of social network analysis, one of the things, and we already had one online session with Shane Dawson, in which we discussed about general concept of social network analysis, define what's social network analysis, etc. One of the important things is, although social network analysis is a very multidisciplinary field and uses many methods from statistics, mathematics, and computer science, for the purposes of this course, students don't have to have any understanding of those general concepts. They just need to understand some general definitions of certain measures that we are introducing in this course. So, for example, in this week, we introduced several of these measures. Some of these measures that are defining a network as a whole. For example, whether a network is dense, meaning that whether everybody knows everybody else. And that is typically associated in whether and how quickly information can flow from a network to a network. For example, there's a very practical example. We earlier this year ran a conference, and at that conference there was the major learning analytics conference, LAK, and during that conference we learned that we could not host our summer institute in Madrid due to certain logistical issues. At that point in time, only George and I learned that information as the core organizers. And we maybe shared that information with a couple of other people. 2 days later, everybody knew. Everybody we turned to knew that. And it basically indicates that a community around the learning analytics is very, very closely connected. Everybody pretty much knows everybody else. They have pretty strong connections, and the network is very dense. Therefore, the spread of information in such networks is very, very fast. And that's something we need to understand also when we are developing good atmosphere in our classes. If we are trying to get our students engaged, we first of all need to that atmosphere where it's comfortable, where students have sufficient number of contacts so that they can turn to, for example, for help or share information or create jointly resources. Therefore, even the first couple of weeks of this course was a great opportunity to establish some of these connections. Even this week is the great opportunity to establish some of these connections. Twitter is an obvious technology to use that. Some technologies have better affordances for that, other technologies don't. For example, discussion forums allow for deeper conversations. However, for quick information flow and getting to know two different individuals, it's not ideal. That's why we are offering that opportunity in this course as well. On the other hand, in this course, we also want to point out, and especially in this week, we are studying what are these sources of social networks that people can use. And we are saying that that can be done with self-reports. So, for example, you are working in an organization where you are not necessarily interested just in what's happening online, but you are more interested in, for example, what's happening in terms of innovation spread or innovation diffusion. And in those cases, you are interested to interview, for example, instructors or organizational administrators and understand who is talking to whom. And based on that, you can then see potential spreads of influence. And that's very important. Of course, the other important source of information, and we are going to study that especially next week, is, for example, all these online technologies we are using. For example, any tweet and any retweet is already creating a social connection, or any response to a tweet, or any response to online discussion forums. So those are very important connections. But then we can then, based on these types of connections, identify how and certain nodes are active and how central they are in the networks. But at the same time, we are also interested to see what are the potential communities that may emerge inside of those. And that's another topic that we are studying this week. And final topic in this week that we are studying is related to the tool that supports all these different types of analysis. It's Gephi. Generally, it's fairly easy to use tool, and what we've so far learned, the hardest part with Gephi is just to get it to work, the installation itself. We shared very detailed instructions how to install Gephi, but obviously some students still need to have certain problems, not necessarily that we envision those, but unfortunately everybody has a different computer and slightly different configuration. We still recommend that you follow those instructions. Some of those changes that you will need to do are quite radical, that you need to, for example, install a new version of Java or regress and go to the previous version of Java. Unfortunately, that's something we need to take. That's the risk. That's what we need to do when we are dealing with an open source technology, and which is usable, but at the same time comes with a price. So hopefully you will get used to it. And on the other hand, I think Gephi is a really great technology to play with. There is one thing that is, of course, related to this theme of social network analysis, but it is also related to the first 2 weeks that George introduced, and then the next 4 weeks that Caroline and Ryan are going to take over. And that's basically that we, in each of these weeks, have something which is define particular types of things. And many students were not quite sure how that definition should be. Some of the participants even mentioned, well, all the answers are in the content and the videos that we are presenting. Well, it's not really that we are requesting from students in this course when they are, for example, blogging about the definition just to reproduce what we said. That's not really the point. The point is to try to provide integration of what we said in the slides with, for example, some of your experience, with, for example, some of the other content that you found in the course, and so that you provide a bit of a reflection. This is at least how I'm seeing that integration, and I'm sure George, maybe, or Caroline, would you like also to share some of your insights? When we ask students to define something, we don't really just expect that from them to repeat what we said in the slides, don't we?
No, absolutely not. And I think one of the things that's interesting, particularly with networks as well, Dragon, this came out of some work I did about a decade ago. I was working with a corporate education group, and one of the things that I did with them at that time was to look at the ways in which work got done within their network. And this was based on work that Rob Cross had published on at the time. And so we spent a fair bit of time looking at how within this organization, so we did a network analysis looking at what do you do for which networks in your organizations. And so we found that some instances, if you had a social need, if you will, and there's about 110, 115 people in the organization, so if they had a social need, such as and one of the questions we were asking is, when you have something that you want to share that's not work related, who do you interact with? And we had a series of questions that related to, if you have concerns about the project you're working on, who do you go to? Or if you are having some difficulties with a colleague, and so on. And it was very interesting just to see how different network configurations were based on different types of interactions that individuals wanted to do. So I think in the same sense, to go at this a long way around, when we start talking about learners in a course like this, a similar expectation I think is there as well, that if you treat the course content as one node, it's a provision node, there's information, here's how to do this thing in Gephi. From there, it's about trying to broaden your interest, whether you find, I saw a few examples of students that had gone out, or course participants had gone out and created a nice visualization that they pulled out of any kind of data they had access to. Sometimes I know there was one individual that was quite interested with Tony's talk, and particularly looking at OpenRefine and the way in which it made it easier working with data, or someone who's starting to try to map out just different types of visualizations that came from really any kind of data they could get their hands on, whether that was university-related data. That came up several times because a lot of universities publish institutional data and so on. So it's very much about saying, this idea here is we've got some ideas for you to think about. From there, it's much like I mentioned, with different networks do different things for us. So in one regard, your network within DALMOOC is going to give you some insight into a few topic areas, but then take those ideas and move them into new networks that allow you to apply it into different context and interact with people in a different way.
Those are great suggestions, George, and I mean, it is really important to emphasize, and we are going to cover that especially in week 4 of the course, is that typically those individuals or those nodes in networks who are centrally positioned, that is to say they connect with many other different, most important, diverse types of nodes, they are exposed to many different ideas, to many different types of languages, or many different types of approaches. And that in many cases is associated with a higher level of also creativity, with higher level of academic achievement, with better even job performance. So those are some of the critical outputs, and that's why, like, while studying content in a course is very important, it's critical, at the same time it's also important to engage with others, because others offer opportunity to connect, to share those ideas, and to seek for some help. Caroline, you also spend quite a lot of time doing research in computer-supported collaborative learning, and I'm sure you have something to share, for example, on different ways how students construct argument in these types of online environments, or other types of educational functions that online interaction with others can be beneficial for learning.
Yeah, so we have often been very surprised at how much students seem to benefit just from having another student to work with on a problem. And that's part of the reason why it's been so important to us to develop ways that we can provide opportunities for students to engage in these kinds of interactions in the MOOC. And getting back to this idea of the blog posts, as just an example, and you might think of a blog post as being just a personal reflection, it's just your speaking out to the world, but it does really give others the opportunity to see how you're presenting your view on the material and to comment on it. And I've also noticed that some people have then posted to the discussion forums with links to their blog posts, which also just creates the opportunity for others to read it and then respond and engage with them. And usually what we are hoping will come out of these interactions is that students don't just take the material for granted as it was presented to them, but they reflect on what it means to them. And actually, I have seen a lot of students in the blog posts that they write be very reflective of the material and not just taking the presentation as it was given to them as given, but have discussed ways in which it resonates with them or doesn't resonate with them. And then that gives other students the opportunity to ask themselves the same questions and to respond. And the hope then is that students start to realize that when we take these aspects like, you know, these tools that we're learning how to use, when we really want to use them, we should use them in a reflective way, because they're just lenses and they're helping us to see things, and then we have our own way of using those lenses and interpreting what we're seeing, but somebody else might bring such a very different perspective that will challenge us, that will break us out of our own mold, that will cause us to think in ways that we never had the opportunity to do before. And so that's the kind of experience that we're hoping that these various ways of contributing back, of engaging either in pro solo or just doing a blog post in general or discussion forums or even in the chats that we've seen or even the tweets that people have contributed, just ways in which then others are able to see that somebody coming from a very different place can have these materials hit them in very, very different ways.
Thanks much, Carolyn. Those are some great suggestions for students, especially with respect to reflection and why that reflection works. And among others, Carolyn's work as well builds on a method which is called Think Aloud protocols. And those Think Aloud protocols are commonly used in educational research, but they are also used in self-regulated learning research, and they are typically attributed to something which is not super accurate for that type of research, simply because the moment you think aloud, and in this case you are verbalizing something, you are actually already reflecting, and you are additionally regulating the quality of your learning. And therefore, when you are blogging about something, and especially in the way how Caroline nicely put, that is to say that you are reflecting and associating that with your own experience, with the problems and the types of authentic context that you may be acquainted with, then you are activating deeper processes for learning. And that's quite essential in this course as well. At the same time, when we are talking about networks, there is another important thing, that we are offering many different technologies. Some of these technologies, and I think we are having a great opportunity in this week, we are analyzing, for example, 2 different data sets. One is a toy example, and you can play with that toy example. This is more just to introduce social network analysis. The other data set, it's much more serious. It's from a course like this one. It has basically all the tweets which happen inside of that course, and then you can see what are those potential networks that are emerging on Twitter. What are the opportunities? On the other hand, what we are going also to do, and we will announce soon, but probably on Monday, we are going to organize another live session in which we are going to share some of the results of the existing social network analysis that we perform on the data that's been collected over the period of the last couple of weeks in this course, so that we can then compare what's happening on Twitter, what's happening on discussion forums, and what's happening, for example, on Facebook. And we can see that each of these different media are affecting the way how we interact with others. And in the same way also affects our potential social capital that we can leverage, for example, for our learning, for generating new ideas, or simply for having general future collaboration with some other individuals. So those are some of the lessons learned with respect to these technologies. In terms of some of the hands-on activities that we have in this week and the following week, we have like 4 or 5 different hands-on activities, and you will see that all these hands-on activities are really just a formative way which will gradually prepare you how to complete the assignment which is related to the core with the data set that we shared in this course. On the other hand, we also offer opportunities for students in this course to learn more about their own networks by analyzing Twitter, by analyzing, for example, Facebook. Some students said, well, what if I don't have, for example, Twitter or Facebook account? Well, in those cases, we are offering the data set you can play with and experiment. These other 2 assignments are just for those who are interested to learn more and reflect on the way how their network work. Therefore, in that sense, consider that the hands-on activities are really to prepare you how to use some of these techniques. how to reflect on the whole process, and then the assignment will just simply click naturally as an outcome of these formative hands-on activities. That's the whole point for this one. We are reaching also close to the end of the conversation. We have last 5 minutes. So after these 2 weeks and a half, what other message or advice, George and Carolyn, would you like to share with students?
Well,
I think
sorry, go ahead,
I'm
Carolyn.
sorry, go ahead.
George is on mute. Okay, I'm going to decide. Carolyn, please.
Okay, I just wanted to say, you know, I'm always really surprised when I see comments from students who are so worried about being a little bit behind or just not being able to do all of the activities of the course, or not seeing that it's really kind of a smorgasbord and you don't have to do everything. I would really like to encourage students to just feel comfortable with where they're at and to really feel comfortable with the choice that they have to engage in some activities and not others, and just feel good about you know, taking the opportunities that look interesting to you. And if you just happen to not be in lockstep with the other students, just take your time. It's totally fine, and hopefully you can still get the support that you need as you reach out. If you notice that you're not, say something, because we are watching what people are posting, and we're trying to jump in as we can. And really we just want to offer opportunities that people can take or not take. You don't have to do everything.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice, Carolyn. I think I'm not sure if it's because we spend so much of our time in formal schooling, and that we feel that if something's put in front of us, we have to master it, or that it's our responsibility to make sense of it. But realizing that you can dive in and take what you want. And I know Ryan's made this point several times in the forums, but and one of the things I think you'll find with this course as well, because it is actually rather modularized, which means that if you start now, you could start in week 3 and ignore everything you did in week 1 and 2. There might be a few reference points, but other than that, you can start with the videos in week 3 and just go through network analysis videos. Once Ryan starts his unit again, you'll have the same experience. So there's little points of overflow back and forth, but you could literally do week 1 and 2 alone, or week 3 and 4 alone, or 5 and 6, or 7 and 8. So that's, I think, one of the unique aspects of the way the course is configured. Quick point, though, I just want to mention, Dragon, it's something I've been thinking about is this course, we haven't quite seen as many social connections come out as I've seen in some other courses, and I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's because, now, every course I've run as a MOOC has always been distributed, so that format isn't necessarily it. I'm not sure if it's the edX platform, the fact that it's hard to have an identity within edX other than just your username, and you can see sort of lists of posts that others have done. But I mean, it's a big question. Just like Carolyn mentioned at the start, that we've been paying attention to how people are talking about the course, and particularly the way they're experiencing it. I'm quite confident that the dual layer kind of thing is the way that MOOCs need to go, but I'm also quite confident that we have to do a much better job of onboarding participants into this course format, meaning that we have to help students navigate between one and the other and to understand what those expectations are. And we found even with MOOCs around in the past where somebody they start as in one course, they come back when we've taught the second course a year later, and suddenly they become literally by default teaching collaborators in the course because they're able to help other students move their way through it. So, but we still have a responsibility as designers and educators to make sure we get that approach right. So I think that's something that we have to do a better job of, is supporting learners, but also helping learners form social networks. I mean, that's such a big part of this course, is that you're connecting with your peers, whether it's on Google+, I've seen quite a few good interactions there, a few on blogs, a fair bit on Twitter, not as much substantive relationship or identity building within edX, but that might just be a platform issue.
Thanks, George, for sharing those. Those are really great ones, and even some of our preliminary research, as you know well, indicates that whenever we are using these types of centralized platforms, it's not just edX, but it could be another type of learning management system, that these types of social interactions for some reason fade away, and they are not as active or as alive as they may happen on especially designed social media. But at the same time, we also can see from this example of this course how certain kind of culture of learning, which is cherished by several MOOC providers, including edX or Coursera, and etc. In many cases, students are just pushed to have this kind of individual focus and just the content focus. And therefore, just that level of expectation is probably another cultural reason that in this case is affecting the ways how even social networks are created. In any case, I think we reached our 30-minute mark, and I would like to wrap up our live session. I would like to thank Carolyn, George, and Ryan for taking time to join us today, and we are looking forward to interacting with everybody on social media and other technology available in the course. Thanks.